Well, hey everybody, welcome into this Adobe Photoshop tutorial brought to you as always by tutvid.com. If you're new around here, my name is Nathaniel Dodds, and today we're going to take a look at creating this really cool photo manipulation effect of like this body flying through a portal. We're going to basically do all of it with a couple stock photos, of course, but it's really, really cool. You're going to learn a whole lot. This is done by an artist named Brian Bett. Check him out over on Instagram. I'll have his link down in the bio. Super talented young man. Absolutely recommend giving him a follow and checking out his work. Really cool stuff. I saw this particular piece of artwork about a year ago. I thought it'd be really cool, and I'm finally getting around to doing a tutorial on how I think it's made or how I would make something kind of similar to it. So without further ado, let's jump right into Photoshop and check this thing out. Okay, here we are in Adobe Photoshop. I've got my starting stock photo. I have a link to this exact stock photo in the description to this video. Now, I've gone in because you probably want a photo with a shallower depth of field. This didn't have necessarily a shallow depth of field, so I went in and did some changes and adjustments in the blur gallery to give this a nice shallow depth of field. Then you can see blurred and blurred and blurred and blurred and blurred, and I got this nice little effect. I'll probably just kind of lock this in place at this point by coming up here to Layer, going New, and just choose New Background from Layer. Now it'll treat it like it's the true blue background image for our manipulation here. Now I'm just going with, like I said, I wanted something that was like a city street, something that had a very neon lit outrun vibe to it, and I think this image serves us well for that. And you can get this exact image. It's a free stock photo from our friends at Unsplash. Again, link down in the bio. All right, now to get this process started, we want to add a curves adjustment layer here. So I'll go ahead and add that, and then I want to kind of flatten and darken the image. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of pull the black point up, and then I'm going to pull the white point way down, maybe something like that. Just really kill off contrast and darken the image simultaneously. Then I'm going to come over here and grab the rectangle tool. Now, with the rectangle tool, I'm creating a shape, and right now I have it set to no fill and just any old stroke. We're probably going to tweak and adjust the stroke a little bit, but right now it's pink, 25 points, and it's a solid line. That's great. I'm going to click a single time, and I'm going to say, look, give me a rectangle that's 600 pixels wide by 1230 pixels tall. So it's going to be a tall, thin rectangle here, looking good for us. I'm going to move it kind of to the middle of our document. I'm going to go ahead and select the stroke here, and I'm going to choose the color picker, and I'm going to give this the fill of D40243. So you can see it's kind of a pink, kind of a red. There we go, something like that. And I'm going to say, hey, look, I want you to be 30 points. And then also from my stroke alignment here, I'm going to say, look, center the stroke over the path. That's an important little step. We're going to select our rectangle out here, and I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate it. And I'm going to, for this top rectangle here, change the color of my stroke, again, by coming over here to my color picker. I'm going to set this to FF FB CB, which is a very, very light beige / buttery yellow color. And then I'm going to set the size of the stroke here to 7 points. I'll just give this layer a name like yellow stroke, something like that. And this one will be pink stroke. There we go. I'm going to shut off the yellow stroke layer, and then with the pink stroke layer, I'm going to duplicate it twice by hitting Command or Control J and Command or Control J. Now, the bottom most of our pink strokes, I'm going to come in here and blur it 35 pixels. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and it's going to say, hey, look, you've got a shape layer. You either need to rasterize it or convert it to a smart object. It's no longer going to be editable as a shape. Fine, great, no big deal. Let's convert it to a smart object just so we preserve a little more editability. And I'm going to say, look, give me a 35 pixel Gaussian blur for this base pink stroke. We're going to come to the pink stroke above that, and we're going to give this one a Gaussian blur as well. Blur, Gaussian blur. This one's only going to be 25. Again, convert to smart object. This one's only going to be 25 pixels. Okay. And then the top one, once more, we're going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and convert to smart object, and 25 pixels as well. Okay, let's select the bottom pink stroke, and we're going to set this to the blend mode screen. And then the middle one here, we're going to set to the blend mode of soft light. And the top one is going to remain normal. You can see we're already getting kind of a cool sort of hovering pink rectangle, glowing rectangle effect. I'm going to turn on the yellow stroke layer here, and I am going to set this to soft light. Then I'm going to hit Command or Control J once, maybe twice. I really want this to look like a nice bright snapping ribbon of light traveling through my pink tubes. And I'm going to duplicate this one more time, Command or Control J, so we should have 4 yellow strokes. The topmost stroke, I'm going to set to the blend mode linear dodge add, and then I'm just going to reduce the fill here to about 80% opacity. The fill opacity, that is, 80% fill opacity. All right, so now it's time to add a little perspective. So let's grab all of our yellow strokes, hold down Shift, select the top yellow stroke, select the bottom yellow stroke. Don't worry about the pink strokes. We're going to get to them in a moment. And hit Command or Control T. We're going to free transform these. Right-click within the bounding box and choose perspective. I'm going going to pinch down on the left side of my shape until I get to about negative 10 degrees or so. So negative 9.9 is great. I'm going to commit that change. There we go. Now we're going to select the 3 pink strokes, Command or Control T. It's going to say, look, smart filters apply. They're going to be turned off temporarily, yada, yada, yada. Great. Right click within here, perspective this bad boy, and let's shrink this down as well. You're going to see it's going to look a little funky. Don't worry about that. And this one, we're not going to do so much by the numbers. We're going to kind of do it just by look and feel. Maybe I'll use my arrow keys and nudge it over to the right a little bit. And then I'm going to commit this change. I'm going to see what it looks like, and I'll readjust if need be. Maybe nudge it back to the left 1 or 2 little bits. There we go. So something like that looks pretty good. Now, at this point, we've created the base of our portal. Let's make the inside of the portal a little bit darker. So I'm going to select my curves adjustment layer here. I'm going to zoom in on this. And this doesn't really have to be exact. It just has to be kind of close enough. So I'm going to grab the poly lasso tool, and I'm going to drag a little selection around the inside of my portal. I'm holding down spacebar, by the way, to move around while still using the poly lasso tool. There we have it. And then I'm going to move up. And as soon as I get close to the edge, just join that selection off. Zoom out a little bit. We've got a selection of the inside of our portal, or, a rough approximation of one. And I want to add another curves adjustment layer. Now, because I have this selection active, you're going to see it's going to give me a curves adjustment layer with a layer mask, and the white part is the only part that's attacked by our curves layer. So all the rest of the image there, covered up with black, is not going to be affected. So here with our new curves, I can double click on the curves. This is the curves we're working with. I want to do a little bit here. So I'm going to just boost this up to really, again, start killing off contrast, and once more I'm going to darken and kill off contrast by just reducing the white point way down, something like that. Maybe I'll drop this a little bit more. I want it to be noticeably darker within my portal. So something like that. Maybe I'll kill off a little bit more contrast, something like that. It should be noticeable, but not an insanely crazy difference. All right, let's create a vibrance adjustment layer here, and I'm going to reduce both vibrance and saturation negative 15, and I don't want to do that to the whole image, so hold down Alt or Option and just drag up that same layer mask and drop it on top of the layer mask to replace it. So now that curves and vibrance adjustment layers, they only affect the inner portion of our portal. All right, now the next part of this is going to be kind of up to you a little bit. You want to go out, check out a website like Brush Easy and find a nice, fine dust and scratches type brush, because we're going to add some sort of sparkles around our frame. First thing I'm going to do is click on my foreground and set my foreground color to D3296E, I believe. Yeah, just a really kind of hot pink color. I'm going to grab my brush tool. Now I'm going to right click, and in here, all the way down near the bottom, I have a dust particles brush that I'm going to use. I can select any one of these. I'm just going to select like this one here, WG Dust Particles. Maybe if you Google that, you'll find it. I'm pretty sure it's a free dust particle brush pack. Now, the size of 2500 pixels, a little large for me, so I'm going to go down to like 300, something like that. Now, I want to randomize this a bit, so I'm just going to click out over here. I want to open up my brush panel here. This is brush settings. I'm going to tick on shape dynamics, and you can see you're going to get a preview of sort of the behavior of our brush here. It just lays down the same exact thing every time. I'm going to boost size jitter to maybe about 50%, leave control off, let Photoshop totally randomize it for us, and then set angle jitter to like 80, 90%, and again, leave control off. Now we're getting a very randomized dust particle brush that we can just click around and get all kinds of different sizes, shapes, angles of dust and particles. Really cool. All right, I'm going to close my brush settings panel. Before we do anything, we need to create a new layer on which we will paint our dust. So new layer, and I'll name this layer dust. And then I'm just going to start dotting around in here. Now I need to reset my foreground color. I must have been in a mask before when I did that. So what was it? D3296E, I want to say, something like that. I'm going to hit OK. And let's just go in here and begin clicking around. Now, just a quick side note, opacity of the brush and flow of the brush, both at 100%. That's a little important. And then you just go in here and just start clicking around. So we're making our dust and particles just pop all around this. Maybe I'll zoom in so we can really see what's going on. See all those little particle speckles that I'm making? All right, so you don't want to go too crazy. You don't want too much. And I'm just tapping with my Wacom tablet multiple times. I'm not trying to just click and drag one big swath of paint. That would look really bad. You want to let Photoshop do its randomizing magic and just kind of, I don't know, make something special. There we go, something sort of like that. That'll be good for a first pass, I think. And what I want to do is duplicate the dust. Let's duplicate it twice, actually. So Command or Control J and Command or Control J. We can go ahead and select each of the lower dust layers and just apply a very slight Gaussian blur. So Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'm going to do literally 1 pixel. There we go. And then the other dust layer, we can go filter, and we can just choose Gaussian blur again. So we've got a 1 pixel Gaussian blur on both of our underlying dust layers. Let's select the top dust. We want to make this solid white. So I'm going to hit Command or Control U, which will open up hue saturation and just boost the lightness to 100%. See that white dust on top? And then we're going to set the blend mode of this guy to linear dodge add and reduce the fill opacity down, I don't know, somewhere around 50. So we're just going to have this bright cracking sparkle in the middle of our pink dust. Now that I have this, I'm going to select all my dust layers by holding on Shift, selecting all 3 layers, hit Command or Control G to group them up, and I'm just going to name this dust_1, and I want to duplicate this entire group, Command or Control J. So now you can see we're really making our dust pop, but that's a little too much. I just want to kind of thicken things up a little bit. So I'm going to first rename this to Dust2, and then hit Command or Control T. We're just transforming the entire 3 layers at a time. Right-click and just hit Flip Vertical, and then right-click again and choose Distort. And I'm just going to pinch down the left side a little bit. So I'm going to pinch these in. And after I get that side lined up, I'm just going to pull this side out. Because again, it's supposed to be a portal. So the idea is going to be that there's like dust and stuff kind of shooting through it, if that makes sense. So we'll just take this and kind of pull some of our dust through here. Maybe something sort of like that. I don't know. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just kind of has to work. And maybe I'll shift the whole thing over a touch, commit that change, and I think that'll be good enough for us. Now, to make this really blend in with the environment around it, you can see, by the way, why I want kind of a neon lit scene, because it sort of is almost like a neon colored portal through which our character is going to be jumping here in a moment. We want to create a glow. It would be the equivalent of the shadow, but in this case, it's more of a glow cast on this rainy street. So we're going to create a new layer here, and I'm going to call this glow, and we will grab our elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to drag out just a kind of a little ellipse like that, and we're going to fill this with a color. So I'm going to select my foreground color, and we're going to fill this with D40243. So again, a little bit of a darker pink, and just hit Option Delete. That's Alt Backspace on the PC to fill that shape, and then Command or Control D to deselect. Let's go now. Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to apply a 30 pixel blur to this just to blur that up a little bit. And we're also now going to free transform this, Command or Control T. I'm going to move this kind of underneath where it needs to go. Now, whereas with the rectangle, we pinched the left side to make it swing away. In order to make the shadow look like it's swinging away, let's right click here and go perspective. I actually want to pull it up. So you can see it almost disperses the shadow a little bit more, or in this case, the glow, I should be saying. Let's go back to free transform. I'm going to pull this out. And here we're going to have that new automatic proportion feature. So just hold down Shift and we can stretch that glow out a little bit. I'm still getting used to it like everybody is. There we have it. And then I'm going to rotate this a little bit to place it on the ground, kind of beneath where I need it to be. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option. I'm just going to make the glow a little bit smaller. Maybe knock it over into place, something like that. Click the little check icon to commit the change, and then grab our Move tool, and maybe I'll move it over kind of sort of like that. Let's duplicate the glow on the ground by hitting Command or Control J. I'm going to select the bottommost glow here, and I'm going to blur this a little more. Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I don't know that I want 30 pixels more, although you know what, 30 pixels more looks good. We're going to go with 30 pixels more, and the lower glow I'm going to set to linear dodge. So let's go linear dodge, add, great, and then just reduce the fill opacity to about 80%, something right about there. Let's turn on the top glow, select that, and I'm going to try setting this to, let's go maybe soft light. And here we'll just reduce the opacity down to about 70 or so percent. So there's before, there's after. We have a nice glow on the ground, which we're able to see through to see the highlights and everything of the rainy street beneath it. Looking pretty good. We could use the blend if sliders and make it a little more perfect, but let's get moving on with the tutorial. All right, so the time has come to add our model, dancer, subject, whatever. I've got this guy here. I'm going to drag him over and place him in my document. This guy comes from an Adobe stock photo. I'm going to drag him up to the top here. I just masked him out really quickly there. And I'm going to Command or Control T, and let's just reduce him down, I don't know, maybe like 30%, see what that looks like. Maybe I'll make him a little bit bigger than that. Don't hold down Shift. There we go. Maybe something sort of like that will work. I want it to sort of look like he's jumping through the portal. So something like that will probably be good for us. Now what I want to do is begin masking him so like his hands and foot appear behind our portal. So I'm going to do that by applying a second layer mask to our layer. I don't want to gussy up, not really gussy up, I don't want to mess up the mask that I have masking him off of the background. I want to leave that sort of pure. So I'm going to name this model. The way we're going to apply a second layer mask is by hitting Command or Control G to group that. I'm going to name this model. And now we just apply a layer mask to the model layer group. Okay, let's zoom in on this here. Now, all I'm going to do is grab my brush tool again. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to find a large soft edge brush, maybe 300 here. What does 300 look like? That's probably good. Maybe I'll knock it down to like 225 in the size department. Make sure I'm selecting the mask over here. And I want to make sure that my foreground color is set to black. And then I'm just going to begin clicking and just dabbing in where I want him to kind of start disappearing. So we'll make the leg disappear. We'll make the arms disappear, kind of something like that. Maybe the very back of the hood, the hoodie, I should say. And maybe even the toe over here where he's still kind of stepping through, maybe even the bottom of the knee. You get a little, you got to be careful here when you get around these areas because it can go from looking pretty decent to pretty bad, kind of in a hurry. So we'll just hit the letter X to flip my foreground and background color, and my background color is not white, so let's make sure that is solid white. Because when we paint with white on the mask, we bring back some of what we made disappear, and we'll just bring that whole leg back. This is also the advantage of working up on this other mask. Yeah, I can bring all that back, and I just get exactly his knee and not a bunch of background with it, because our other mask is still limiting the amount of the image that ever comes through. A little complicated, but it really is a nice little thing to be able to do. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger using my square bracket keys, hit the letter X to set black as my foreground color again. Great. So now that we've kind of done away with most of his arms and his foot here, and maybe even the back of this, the jacket he's wearing, right? Something kind of like that. We're going to bring some of this back. So I want to do this in kind of a pretty specific way. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab the rectangular marquee tool and drag a big selection out over this whole part of him and line it up exactly with the inside part of our glowing box, just like that. So now we're only painting within this box. Again, grab the brush tool. We're going to set our brush to paint white, and I'm going to say, hey, opacity, I want you to be like 65%. And then I'm going to paint over his arm. 65%, too much. So let's undo that. I'm going to try setting it more like to 35%. We're painting with white. We're going to paint his arms back all the way up to the edge there. That's pretty good. Only one pass with the brush. And I'm going to do the same thing here with his foot. So we sort of see his foot, but it's kind of difficult to see. And now we're going to flip our selection by going select inverse. This flips the selection around. So now if I zoom way out, we can see really everything out here is selected, everything around him. Let's zoom in a little bit more. We want to move our selection over. We want to get our selection line here to the other side of our box. So just use your arrow keys and nudge over. And there we go. That looks good enough. Grab the brush tool. Now, his hand and foot on this side of the portal, we want to be very difficult to see. I mean, very difficult to see. So we're going to go with like 8% opacity, and let's try painting with white, maybe a second pass. So just like that, you can see very difficult, and I'll come down here and get his foot as well. So just a couple passes, and then Command or Control D to deselect. So it's really going to be like he's jumping through, and it's looking pretty cool. We can even go in on this same mask, grab the brush, we want to right click. We would want to get one of our speckled dust brushes down here. So we can just take any one of them, make it pretty small, and we could do that same little just check on shape dynamics and just add some size and angle jitter. That looks good. And we can come in here and paint. I probably want to paint black. So just flip my foreground and background color and just go in over his hands and paint a bunch of times. Just click a whole bunch of times with black. Oh, up the opacity to 100%. What am I thinking? And what we're going to do is start to make it look like his hands are kind of fragmenting away in the same exact pattern that our little sparkles are happening as well. So it can be kind of a cool little effect. We can do the same thing here with the shoe. Just one of those little things, just a very little detail, very subtle, very hard to ever see. But you know what? Success is in those little details. So at this point, we need to begin kind of coloring and dodging and burning this a little bit to help it match our environment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click to add a new layer here. I'm going to call this layer D and B for dodge and burn, and I'm going to clip it to my model by using the hotkey Command Option, that'd be Control Alt and the letter G. Now, I'm going to grab my brush. I've got a big soft edge brush here. I'm going to hit the letter D. It's going to reset my foreground and background color. I'm painting with black. Great. I'm going to zoom in on him a little bit here, and I'm going to maybe zoom out just a touch. I'm going to begin painting black where I want to darken him up. I mainly want shadow to be on the underside, kind of everything he's doing. So my opacity is still at about, whatever, 40 to 50%. That's good. We're going to darken up the shoe. Actually, the shoe's kind of a distraction, so I want to darken it up kind of a lot. And then I'm just going to begin painting the bottom side of everything here that should be kind of shadowed, right? The bottom of his arms, that should be dark. The top of that back arm looks dark. The back side of the shoe here. We don't want anything that's going to be distracting us. So we're going to just darken stuff up here, maybe darken that highlight on the front of his knee a little bit. We're going to play with the highlights in a minute here. But I just really want to darken this stuff up and make it look like it's supposed to look here. Just really darken that shoe up. It really shouldn't be quite as noticeable and sticking out as it is. All right, that's pretty good. You can see we have this layer set to the blend mode of normal. I'm going to, I think, try setting it to like soft light and see. That's going to give us a little bit more in terms of realistic looking shadows that'll inherit some of the color of the underlying image. If the shadowing is not enough for you, you can just hit Command or Control J to duplicate your shadows. Make sure you clip them back in place. I don't know. I think we have enough where I was. So I'm just going to stick with the shadows I have. There's before, there's after. We're really building out those shadows on sort of the bottom side of as much of those surfaces as we can. Now I want to go ahead and target his skin tones. I just want to kind of neutralize those skin tone colors. Because remember, he's a creature, human, super being, whatever, who's able to fly through these portals. We're not really concerned about perfect skin tone. In fact, maybe something a little off-putting or off is going to look good. So here we're going to Command Option or Control Alt and the letter G to clip our hue saturation into place. I'm going to zoom in on his face here, and I'm going to use the little scrubby hand, and I'm going to just desaturate the range that Photoshop finds his face to be. So something like that, and I did it quite a bit. I knocked it down about -80 in the saturation department. We can go before and after. You're going to see that's taken a lot of that orange-brown color out of his arms and sleeves and his face as well. So I think that's nice. Then we're going to add another curves adjustment layer. Clip this, Command Option G, that's Control Alt G on the PC. And here I want to go ahead and maybe like boost the highlights a little bit. I'm going to drag in to drop the shadows just a tiny bit. And then maybe I'll boost the black point just a little to give us a little bit of a faded effect. Then I'm going to come down to the red channel. I'm going to grab the white point for the red channel and drag downward to really infuse the highlights with some cyan. Remember, all of our highlights have this blue and purple element. We want to kind of begin infusing that upon our model. And then I'm going to boost the red just a little bit in the shadows. Remember, we're also going to have some element of our sparkling, glowing portal that is going to be giving its light off on his body. And the more I look at it, I think we should really include the entirety of that shoe. So I'm going to go back to that layer mask. Grab my brush, zoom out just a tiny bit here, and I'm going to paint with white down here just to bring that shoe back into play. Yeah, I think that's much more proper, don't you think? Just darken that whole shoe up a little bit if it's really bugging us, and I think something like that will work. I think that'll just be better. Okay, back to the curves adjustment layer here. Let's jump down into the green channel. And here I want to pull a bunch of magenta into the highlights. So I'm going to pull that down. You can see we're getting this like tainted highlight look. I'm going to boost the greens back through the mids just a little bit here as well. Probably won't mess with the green channel any more than that. And then we'll jump down to the blue channel. And what I'm going to do here is infuse those highlights with a bit more blue, something like kind of like that. And maybe I'll even add some blues to the darker parts of him as well. Something kind of like that. Maybe I'll pull down just through the mids just a little bit to kind of, squeeze back some of that yellowish color. And there we go, something like that. So there's before curves, there's after curves. We're beginning to colorize him. Let's create another curves adjustment layer here. I'm going to clip it in stack, Command Option G, Control Alt G, as we've been doing. Now this is going to be what we create the pink glow with. So I'm not masking it to anything right now, but we are going to mask it in a moment. I want to leave it unmasked so you can see exactly what it's doing to our model. We're not going to mess with the composite RGB channel. We're going to go right to the red, and I'm going to pull a bunch of red into the highlights, right? So we're giving off a lot of that red-pink color. I'm going to push a bunch of red up into my shadows as well. Maybe something right around there. All right, let's go down to the green channel. Here in the green channel, we're going to infuse a bunch more magenta into our highlights. Looks ridiculous. We're going to pull a bunch of magenta over the course of the image into this thing. There we go. And I'm going to jump down to the blue channel. And here in the blue channel, you might be thinking, well, add more blue. We actually don't want to do that. We want to add yellow. Yellow is the opposite of blue. So if I drag down on my white point, it's actually going to be adding yellow, which when we add yellow to this whole thing is going to make a pinkish magenta color look a lot more red. I'm going to drag my red point inward a little bit and just really finish off that red. Try to get a red that kind of closely resembles the red that we have coming off of our glowing portal. All right, let's collapse our curves adjustment panel. I'm going to select the curves mask right there and hit Command or Control I to fill it with black. You can see all that just went away. Now we're going to grab our brush tool. I want kind of a small brush, and I'm going to also turn the shape dynamics back on here. I just want some crazy size jitter, maybe even roundness jitter, something just to make the brush look a little off, just to give us kind of some edge to our light, if you will. So we're painting with an opacity of 40. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, and we'll go through here and just paint some pink right through here. And maybe I'll paint some pink around this side, and his arms probably here are going to be getting dappled with that pink light as well. something like that. I make the brush a little bit larger here. Let's go through, add some pink here to the back of his head. You know, just a bunch of pink in the areas that it would seem would naturally be affected by the pink glow of the frame through which he is jumping. All right, so something like that. We're kind of going a little overboard, but it's easier, or better, I should say, to go a little overboard and then pull back with opacity a little bit than it is to not go enough and have to keep doubling up and making things look bad. Let's double click on our curves adjustment layer, not here on the curves thumbnail, out here in the blank area. What it's going to do is bring up our layer style dialog box. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the blend if options. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and split the handle for underlying layer and then drag this back. So what this is going to do is it's going to get rid of some of that red in some of the more shadowy areas that we painted and just preserve it in the kind of highlighty areas that we painted. Something like that I think is pretty cool. I'll hit OK. Now we're going to add a little bit more glow. We want there to be kind of an explosion of glow as he comes through here. So we're going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J. That's a little bit too much, although kind of looks interesting actually. I am going to right click on this layer and choose Clear Layer Style. You can see what that blend if was doing for us. You know what? I might actually undo that. Command or Control Z to undo that. And I think I'm just going to reduce the opacity of this levels. I'm sorry, not levels, the curves adjustment here. I'm kind of engrossed in this. I'm going off script. I kind of like what I'm seeing here. Let's go to like 65% opacity or so, something like so. Let's see what this looks like if we clip it. Command Option G, Control Alt G. I think I kind of like it clipped. I mean, it's good either way. Maybe I'll leave it unclipped. Maybe I'll leave it unclipped like that. And looking at it, I think I want to zoom back in, and like that just looks like too smooth of a mask, right? It looks pretty fake. So let's go here to the model, and I want to use a dust brush again and really get in there and add some grit to these areas of where the guy should be fragmenting through. So I'm going to right click, grab one of my dust and particle brushes, make it a bit smaller, maybe around 250 or so. I'm going to open up my brush settings panel here, turn on shape dynamics, boost the size jitter, boost the angle jitter, excuse me, close that. I want to be painting with black as my foreground color, so hit the letter X. There we go, black is foreground color. And I'm going to set the opacity probably up close to 100, maybe like 90. And I'm just going to go in here and click a whole bunch of times. Maybe I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller here. I'm just going to click a lot. Okay, so just a couple of minutes of doing that. I think that looks pretty good. I think it adds a lot in terms of really making it look like he's just manifesting himself out of this just nothingness. It's really kind of neat, and we got a great red glow falling from our glowing frame here. Maybe a little bit more pink should fall right on that highlight. So let's go ahead and grab the brush tool, right click. At this point, I'm going to just grab, I don't know, 100 pixel, just soft brush. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. Reduce the opacity here to 40 or 50%. We want to come up here to, maybe we'll go to our top curves adjustment layer here. Make sure we're painting with white, so hit the letter X. We're just going to paint some pink right into that area. Maybe I'll go to my bottom curve as well. Paint a little pink into there. There we go. That's pretty nice. It just looks like it belongs, right? Okay, something like that I think is cool. We went a little off script, but I think we actually made the effect a little bit better. I like it a lot. Okay, so now what we want to make sure we do is all of the highlights as his body is coming through this pink portal should be immediately affected by all of the ambient blue light in the air, all of this neon, all of the everything. So let's create a new layer up here, and I'm going to name this highlights or something like that. I'm going to set it to the blend mode hue. And all I'm going to do, grab my brush tool. It can be a nice soft edge brush. It can be even a little bit bigger than this. I will sample one of the blues off the background, something like that. And we'll go ahead and paint over some of the highlights here on our little model. So let's paint here on his hat. You can see that we're just tinting the hat blue, right? There's before, there's after. Tint maybe his face blue, maybe some of the highlights on the front part of his body, here on the front part of his knee. We can try setting this to the blend mode of color. Ooh, I kind of like that more. Now, it looks a little weird because it's not just stuck on his body, it's coming off of his body. I don't know if I like that yet. I'll be able to tell in just a minute. Let's add some blue here to the front part of the shoe. Maybe that part of the shoe as well. That's kind of cool. It's a little heavy. The blue is a little heavy. So we'll just reduce the opacity of the blue. Reduce it a little bit more, maybe about 60, 50, 55, 60%. That's pretty good. And what I'll do here, there's too much blue in through here. So this is a one use of the eraser tool. I'm going to go and grab the eraser tool, and I'm just going to run the brush through the middle there. The reason that I'm doing that is because I don't want to bring a lot of attention to the midriff area. This area should really be pretty dark. So I may actually go back, create another dodge and burn layer here, just create a new layer in here, and set this to a blend mode of like soft light. Again, we'll grab our brush tool. We're painting with an opacity of 50%. Hit the letter D to give us the color black. And I'll just paint some additional darkness into there because that really should be pretty shadowed up in there. It should be pretty dark. But we definitely want some blue coming across those highlights. That's pretty nice. I'll darken up the front side of his shoe as well a little bit just to distract from any potential, we don't want that to be the focal point of our image. I'll put it to you that way. So there we go. I think that's pretty nice. And at this point, it's really up to you and your discretion. Do you want to add more dust? Do you want to add more glow? I would do that stuff right now because we're about to do some global color adjustments and really just finish this effect off. So what I'm going to do, all the way up here at the top of my layer stack, I'm going to add another curves adjustment, and I'm going to just boost up the black point. So I'm going to really flatten out some of those shadows and bring the whole image together just a little bit more. Then I'll come down to the red channel, and I'm just going to boost the amount of red that I see here, especially in the highlight portion of the image. I'll come down here to the green channel. What I'll do here is just pull a little bit of magenta through the kind of darker ends of the photo. I'm really watching. The red is starting to blow out in there, so I may want to come in here to either one of these curves layers and just reduce the opacity of that glow a little bit. It's just better to preserve the details than start making it look like we get this chunky, bizarre color. Back to the curves layer here, I'm going to jump down to the blue channel. And here in the blue channel, we're going to go ahead and really add some yellow to the highlights. That's going to help boost the red-pink effect of our portal. And then maybe I'll boost a little bit of blue into the shadows. So we can see there's before the curve layer, there's after. We're flattening things out. We're helping pull all the colors together a little bit more. Next up, we're going to kind of sell out and make a wholesale change here. We're going to use a color lookup table right there. It's that adjustment layer. And I'm looking for the futuristic bleak. There it is, futuristic bleak. It's a preset, a LUT that comes with Photoshop. And what I'll do with this is just reduce the opacity of it, kind of down, down, down. I don't know, maybe around 25%, something like that. It's just going to help flatten and tone our colors a little bit. Let's add a hue saturation adjustment layer. I think I'm going to target kind of the pink color here on the glowing portal, and I want to boost the saturation of it just a little bit. And now that it's targeted, you can see that's the targeted sector that Photoshop has chosen for us. I'm also going to shift the hue a little bit. Do I want it to be a little more red? Do I want it to be a little more pink? You can kind of choose what you like. I think I like it pushed a couple ticks in the reddish direction. I think that's a little nicer. I like that. And the last color change we'll make is adding a color balance adjustment layer. For this, I'm going to add some cyan to the midtones, just like -10 for that. I'm not going to mess with the greens. I will add a bit of blue to the midtones. I'll go down to the highlights here. I'm going to add a bit of red to the highlights. Again, just remember the whole glowing portal, that's when I'm thinking of the highlights, that's the primary area that I'm focused on because I know it's kind of the brightest part of the focal point of my image. For the green, we'll actually take out a little green, add a little magenta, which will add some of that pinky color. And we'll also add a little bit of yellow, again, to help support that red that we added to the highlights. And then here in the shadows, I'm going to add a bit of cyan, so like -30 in the reds for the shadow department. Add just a little bit of magenta. Let's go -5. And then I'll go like -15 to add some yellow to those shadows as well. Should I add blue to the shadows? Blue might be a little heavy. You know what I mean? Maybe a couple drips of blue. Let's go like +1 or 2 in the blue. I'm going to make a little executive call there. All right, that looks kind of cool, right? There's still something that looks a little funky about the shoe. I would probably end up messing around with that a little bit. Maybe I'll reduce the opacity of my color balance layer overall just to help kind of pull this whole thing together a little bit. There's before color balance, there's after. I definitely think it helps. We just don't want it to be too ridiculously heavy. And then I think the absolute last thing we need to do is add a grain layer because no photo manipulation, no photo retouch is complete without just adding some retouching blending grain to help pull everything together. Edit, fill, and let's go 50% gray. I'm going to right-click on this and convert it to a smart object. And then I'm going to hit Control-Shift-A. That, for if you're wondering, is the Camera Raw filter hotkey. Why Camera Raw? Well, because I think it's kind of got the best grain in Photoshop. So we're going to say, look, add a whole bunch of grain. Let's add a bunch of size, and let's make it very rough. So just, kind of a chunky grain like that. And then I'm going to hit Command or Control-J to duplicate this. I'm going to hit the little toggle down arrow, double-click on Camera Raw filter. And for this instance of the grain, I'm going to go back. I'm going to make the size quite a bit smaller. And do I want it to be rough? Yeah, I still want it to be pretty rough, but I just want the size to be a lot smaller and maybe reduce the amount. We don't need to worry about the amount. We'll control opacity a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to set this to the blend mode soft light. And then I'm going to set the bottom grain layer also to the blend mode soft light. Now we can see it's way too grainy. So just reduce the opacity of both of our grain layers to like between 30 and 40% usually works. You get a nice grain. Maybe I'll take down the chunky grain a little bit more, about 20%. Let's go about 20, 25 for each of them. There we go. Just a nice subtle grain. It just helps blend our colors a little bit more. And we have gone from just a standard street scene like this, and we've meshed in our guy leaping through a portal. Again, you can spend all the time you want tweaking and adjusting. I would probably still tweak and try to bring some of that blue light through there into the highlight of his jacket. So I'd come in here, get a little blue action, and just dab or tap that into there. Let me get a little bit of blue, tap that into there. And I know I got rid of the blue before, but maybe I should double click on highlights, split the underlying layer darks, and just get rid of some of the blue that would fall into the shadows and just keep the blue that's going to be attacking the highlights. So something like that might work a little bit better for us. And in that case, I can probably boost the opacity of that blue color layer as well. So there's just so much you can do to come in and play with this, have a little bit of fun with it, and really build out your very own photo manipulation using these techniques in Photoshop. Well, there you have it. It took a little bit of time, but we got it done, didn't we? It looks pretty cool. It's sort of an approximation of what the original artist did. I think his work's definitely better, but this is kind of how I would go about doing it. And if I spent another few hours tweaking and adjusting and really manicuring it and massaging it into place, I think we could get something really, really, really cool. But you can see kind of how it's done. Now, if you got this far in the video and you completed the tutorial with your images and you made an effect that you love, I would love to see it. Upload it to Instagram. Tag me in the image by pressing on the image and actually tagging me in the photo. That way it shows up in my tagged images and I can make sure I get around to seeing it. Sometimes it takes me a couple days to get in there and see everybody's images, but I love seeing what you guys make. I'll drop a comment. I'll drop a like, the whole bit. I just like seeing what you guys make. It's really, really cool. So for creating all of this in Photoshop and working with blend modes and masking and just dodging and burning and some grain there at the end and kind of everything in between, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel.zim, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.